Right, shall we start? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody. Week 3 of the Creating Great Places seminar series. So this week we're going to focus on age-friendly and inclusive design. Because for better or worse, people who create and design a built environment actually determine who's included and who's not. And if we don't think about these things, actually we exclude people. So our focus this week is about disability and ability and age friendliness. Oh my goodness, sorry. Oh, there we are. So at the outset, I want to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Turrbal and Yagara, the traditional owners of the lands where QT now stands. Pay my respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. I recognise these lands were never ceded and have always been places of teaching, research and activity. And I also acknowledge the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play in the QT community. So I'm going to have to move some, well, that's better. Now I can see it, actually see the slides. So we've on to week 3, talking about age-friendly and innovative design. Last week we had child-friendly design, and we asked, the challenge that Tobias put up was for people to do some kind of changes to their front yard. And Alison sent us through some pictures of what she's done in Melbourne in response to COVID. So she is the winner. Well done, Alison. You get a copy of the book. I'm not sure if Alison's here. She was saying she was really enjoying the series, so I hope she is. So she planted the front of her front yard to bring, quote, a smile to small children, parents and members of her community. She's got a series of miniature beach huts. So very place, you know, what's it, place attachment or place focus. And sort of that sense of genius loci when you think about the beach huts of Melbourne. And yeah, she said a really positive response. Pretty nice, eh? Good work, Alison. She set a high bar that I think we all might want to try and meet. So we're just going to do things slightly differently today. I'll do a bit of introduction and a brief recap. Then I'm going to hand over to Tobias. He's going to talk about age-friendly, inclusive designs that he's worked on. Then we'll come back to me. I'll talk about sort of why it's so important to think about inclusive and age-friendly design. And then we'll have a go theory storming a bus shelter. And I just want to moderate people's expectations. Last week, we had a really great conversation about theory storming, you know, a green space, like a child's park. We're able to do that quite well with all these theories because it's a big space. A bus shelter is by nature much smaller. So we have a few different, we'll use a few different examples rather than focusing on one big park. And then we'll have a conversation about what we can do. And I really like this quote from Kate Holmes's recent book called Mismatch, that when we design, we must wonder, who am I excluding? And then allow those answers to change our solutions. So just a brief introduction to us. Again, I'm Yvonne Miller. I'm the director of the QT Design Lab. My background's in psychology and design. And my co-author, Deb.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Deb Cushing. I'm the discipline leader in spatial design, and my background's landscape architecture, and I do research in child-friendly environments.
And Tobias will introduce himself in a second. So we've always said throughout the series and through the book that decisions we make about place really do facilitate or hinder our health and well-being. And so it's really important that we make the right moves. Great places don't just happen, they are created. And we can do that we've suggested through a process we call theory storming. We look at the design problem through multiple theoretical lenses, and because of that, generate some kind of creative and inspired and effective solutions. So if you remember, we talked about 6 critical design theories, and these are affordance, so cues for actions, prospect refuge, your ability to see things but also be protected, place attachment, so being attached to a place, sense of place or genius loci, so that inspiration and a unique character, personal space, so very relevant in these COVID times, and of course biophilic design, my personal favorite, which is about designing with nature in mind. So at the outset, what is age-friendly and inclusive design? It really is thinking and designing for a diverse population. And sometimes we talk about universal design or design for all. And the aim really is to create spaces, buildings, services, products, and environments that can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, culture, ability, or disability. And the power to create this built environment, one that enables rather than disables, it lies in our hands, in the hands of creators, of developers, of designers, and of policymakers. And because of that, it's really important that we actually meaningfully engage and co-design a more inclusive world with people with disabilities and with older people. I'm going to hand over now to Tobias, who's going to talk about some wonderful examples of doing that.
Thanks, Yvonne, and thanks for zooming in, everybody. Please share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? So pretty excited, week 3, awesome. This is actually my favorite topic, inclusive design, designing for all ages, all abilities, all genders. So pretty excited. Quickly, who am I? I'm a landscape architect from Germany. I came here in 2006. And my wife is an occupational therapist, so really passionate about, as I said, inclusive design beyond accessibility. So I'm also the founder of the 7 Senses Foundation, and I work for Urban Play. So at Urban Play, we are really passionate to create great environments for all. So working with QT at the moment as well on intergenerational park design guidelines that were really all about inclusion and leaving a legacy. So here you see also, like in regards to new product, creating product that can be used by all ages and abilities to really get fit and healthy. I guess the cool thing with Urban Play as well, like we provide a total solution from design to the construction of the play, the fitness, the shade, like everything to do to create a recreational space for all. So as you see here, from ages 0 to 100, everything in between, we are the experts in it. That's what I'm really passionate about. And also the evidence base, like it's not just that it looks beautiful, it's actually there's evidence behind it, why it works and how it should be designed to enable everybody to be part of it. I think disability is always a interesting word. And when you talk to the disability sector, it's really that they say, well, they're not really disabled. It's more the environment that disables them to be part of that. So that again comes to this responsibility that Yvonne mentioned. It's up to us as decision makers and designers to understand the users. So when we make one design that fits everybody or everyone, what does that mean? For one, we need to understand the users. So it's really important to have a user-centric design. So with that, for one understanding, we have a demographic change. There's more and more elderly people in our society. So how do we encourage them to be part of that environment that we are designing? But then also in regards to disability, 15% of the world's population have some kind of disability. Even if you don't have somebody in your family or relatives with a disability, there's very high chances that through your lifetime you will have temporary disabilities as well. If you break your leg, you might be in a wheelchair for a few weeks. And but it's also to understand that inclusion doesn't mean just wheelchair accessibility. So we have to really go beyond that and really understand the disability sector and be able to put the head on, hey, how would a person with, let's say, sensory processing disorder enter this space and navigate through this space? So yes, there's a great accessible ramp, but does that really help? So we have to go beyond that. So some of the facts are 25% of our kids have obese, 1 in 100 autism, which is huge, and actually the built environment doesn't only affect this one child with autism, it actually affects the entire family structure. So the whole family can't go to the shopping center for a center meeting because it's all overwhelming. They can't go to a playground where you come in the entrance and there's like the biggest unit with all these like busy bees running around because it's overwhelming. 1 in 20, which is massive, kids have sensory processing disorder, and a lot of times that's not even diagnosed. So that are the kids at school that are Joey, the bad behaved kids. No, he's actually not bad behaved. He actually has a challenge to process the sensory input that he's getting, and the outcome is a behavior one. So a lot of these kids are not even diagnosed, and they're obviously part of our society. So understanding how they engage with the built form and how we can actually create the just right space for them in our environments is key. And 27% of young people experience mental health. And also, that's not even mentioned here, one of the biggest global challenges we have as well is loneliness and the lack of belonging. So, and where can I really connect? And I found that really interesting in our spaces and say, in regards to play as well, when we do this playground and they're fenced off, if I'm an elderly person and I go to a park and there's a nice bench and I might want to connect with the younger demographic, I would never do that, to open a gate and go into a play space and then sit there and maybe meet some kids. And actually the parents would probably call the council as well and say, oh, there's this awkward old man in this playground looking at my kids and having even a chat. But isn't that sad? And when we look back, years back, and that's where the vibe happens on these plazas, let's say in Italy, where young and old are all engaged together, and that's not, oh, that's weird that Peter, the elderly person, talks to some kids. So how do we create this vibe and this engagement where everybody feels comfortable? So I think there's little clues that we can do, and again, this design series storming is really helpful for that. Obviously, a few benefits when we get people all ages within a park. The benefits of exercise. So it reduces the impact of illness and chronic disease, enhances mobility, flexibility, improves sleep, boosts the mood, self-confidence, improves cognitive function. So it has so much more. The loneliness obviously goes, you connect with people, and the more inclusive the environment you're entering is, the longer you will stay and the more of these benefits you will have. So I'm really passionate about, like, how do we create the spaces that enable, connect, and activate? So I think, as I mentioned, with this enabling, I'm from Germany, my wife is from Germany, like my kids never really engage with elderly people. And then we go to parks and it's really hard. Like, how do we get them in? So why not having meandering pathways, secondary pathways that go to parks that are, like, let's say, mindfulness walks. So a mindfulness walk through the park that actually has a secondary pathway that goes to the heart of the playground, for example, and it has a bench there. So the elderly person has a real reason to get through it because it's part of the mindfulness walk, the sensory walk, and people actually, oh, well, what's your name? What are you doing here? So we can actually really engage on a different scale. And I think that's a cool thing with urban places, where that we have solutions for all of these things. Like, we can obviously work with a landscape contractor to do the bare-feet footpaths in regards to the different surfacing we're using, incorporating garden beds, smell, taste, wayfinding through smell. Imagine, like, you like follow the lavender smell to actually find the next spot within it. Then to have, let's say, this Richter water screw. So how do we, again, at a garden bed, it could be that an elderly person actually uses this, like, Archimedes screw to get the water up, and then it goes into a little bucket, and then we are actually watering the garden around. It could be used in retirement villages as well. So let's get a little bit more creative rather than having these silos of different activities to actually connect it. And I think this whole idea of secondary and tertiary pathways within our park system would be a great way to do that. And how can we even use that in the, I guess, civic space? So how do we actually make sensory pathways through Brisbane City? So I think there's so many great opportunities to really engage differently with that connectiveness. Again, another thing what I found really interesting is all the facts on falling. Like, fall prevention costs, or falling costs millions and millions of dollars, only people falling. So how can we actually prevent that, and how can we actually help this elderly demographic get stronger, to work on their balance, to work on their resistance as well? So Compan, again, worked on that over the last few years to develop this new range called Stay Fit. And I just love that. And I think, again, rather to have that in isolation here, for example, in retirement villages, but to combine that with community gardens, with play spaces. So suddenly the entire community comes together. This can be used like for a little, look, you can scooter around it, but then all this equipment is actually designed for fall prevention and helping these older people as well to go through their day-to-day tasks. For example, this spinning element here. So through that helps them to actually brush their hair. So a lot of falls happen actually on staircases. So in the outdoors, in a beautiful environment, just practicing to walk the stairs, going ramps, different surfacing. So again, that helps them when they want to go overseas and they go through the Siena to all these amazing places where we have cobblestones and stuff like that. So how can we be creative with this, but also provide a real benefit for the community? A couple more renders on here. The other thing I wanted to show you is, I really love this park. It's at Newport. It was done with, in collaboration with CUSP and Stockland. There's actually on this side here, when you see my cursor, there's a retirement village. and there's a young and old demographic coming together. And the idea was here to create a park that has one sense of place. It's got the harbor play, it has like a big sailing node through here, but then it has an accessible pathway coming to this like viewing platform, and here's a massive pond. So the elderly people can go here, just watch the water, but engaging with young and old and everybody together. So then what we did is like really to highlight the different zones within that space. So we have a quiet zone where we have like hammocks and just chill out under the canopy. We have this elevated platform as an observation deck where you can overlook, but it has also play activities coming off it. So young and old is encouraged to be part of this space. And then a proprioceptive zone, a swinging zone, vestibular zone, cause and effect. So you jump on here, and old man on the other side jumps in the air. It's like nearly like this double trampoline. A big climbing tower, again, that is viewable. So it gets people to come there. Hey, have you been to the harbor playground? But it's not at the front, actually off the entrance or here. So the entrance are very soft, and you come in and you feel, oh, I'm safe here. So prospect refuge and all these things were considered within that space. And then the color scheme is quite nice as well. So it's nothing like really popping. It really blends in with this Nordic theming. We have a lot of different surfacing from concrete, from rubber, from sand, from bark, from timber structures to steel structures to rubber structures. So it's a really nice balance, I reckon. And the whole thing is that there's a lot obviously on research how important the colors green and blue are. So for the well-being, I think it really came in nicely. And in a few years' time, once all the vegetation is fully established, I think it will be a beautiful landscape for all ages, all ability, really inclusive. And the thing is like, it's hard to see here, but we incorporate also a lot of sandstone for seating, informal seating, because that's so important as well, obviously for older people, but also for parents to just while you're meandering and hang out with the kids, to find nice sheltered spaces under shade to connect, to engage, and to have a conversation. We also did on this one like a bit of a design theory, I guess zoning, but I don't go into that because Yvonne will talk more about that on the bus shelters. But again, here's an example how a project really came in successfully, I believe. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll share this. Yep.
Hang on, and then I need to share my screen. Hang on. Oh. Okay, thanks, Tobias. Oh. So Tobias reminds us that 15% of the world's population, which is 1 billion people, have a disability, and I think it's really important to remember that people with disabilities are diverse. There could be a child born with cerebral palsy, a teenager paralysed in a car crash, a young soldier who loses her leg, a doctor with autism, and an older man with arthritis or dementia. And so we've got these diverse people with disabilities, and we have to think how well or not does our built environment serve them or serve us. And it's a great report probably 10 years ago now called Shut Out. And one of the Australian participants said, I don't expect to get access to the pyramids or Uluru, but I do want to get into all of the library and all of the community centre. And unfortunately, all too often, that's not easy. And the social model of disability shifts the onus of disability, the onus of responsibility away from the individual onto us as a society to respond. And one of the quotes in the report I'll read said, and I quote, if I lived in a society where being in a wheelchair was no more remarkable than wearing glasses, and if the community was completely accepting and accessible, my disability would be an inconvenience and not much more than that. It is society which handicaps me far more seriously and completely than the fact I have spina bifida. So it is actually very much about the surroundings that we need to change. Our world can be really inaccessible. So these are a figure from our book. This is just some stairs at a shopping centre that really hard, a doorknob, hard to open, if you've got arthritic hands, and there's steps in the bathroom. Now these steps were from an American researcher. She did a project to get people to take photographs of their environment and what enabled and didn't enable. And one of her participants said, and I quote, these aren't just any steps. At the top of these steps, it's a local bar, restaurant, and all-round local hangout favoured by many of my co-workers. Why am I showing them to you? I mean, I know you've seen steps, and while they're really nice brick steps, they don't appear to be anything special, but they are. These steps provide access to much of the social interaction between my friends at work. They hold insight to private jokes and conversations of people whose company I enjoy. These steps lead the way for me to interact with friends. These steps stop me in my tracks. And I think it's a really powerful reminder that the choices we make when we design things can either exclude or include people, even modern contemporary buildings. So libraries, actually I really love libraries for lots of reasons, but they're very much been designed and perceived as being that third space now, that important space that's part of the community. We've got home, we've got work, and then we've got community public spaces such as libraries. And so this is the Hunters Point Library in New York City. It was just built just last year by Stephen Hull Architects, was designed a decade ago, though it had quite a big budget, and yet it's quite inaccessible. So several of these floors in the library are inaccessible to people who can't climb them. Adult fiction was actually placed on level 3 only, and it was accessible only by stairs. And the initial response was, oh, the librarians could fetch any books you want. And so you can imagine that there was quite an uproar about that. And we quote a response here. To me, that's the response of somebody who's never had the experience of going somewhere and not being able to fully participate. Part of what universal design is about is allowing everybody to independently enjoy spaces. Having to ask someone else to help you is, at worst, I need to, sorry guys. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Hang on. Is it worse, demeaning, at best, a limiting experience? And it's the same thing here we see in this library in Denmark. It voted the best new public library of 2016, but the main access is through these stairs that are really steep, and that's not inviting or fair or accessible. So we need to do better. And that's where there's a lot of frameworks that can help us. Universal inclusive design and designing an accessible environment benefits us all, because good user-centered design practice not only supports people with disabilities, but has a broader benefits for everybody. So curb cutouts help parents. Information in plain language and simple graphics helps people with less education and children and people from foreign places. And announcements at each stop on public transport help us all know where we're at. It's a number of frameworks that can help us. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but just briefly, the 7 principles of universal design focus on very much about physical space and how we can redesign it from a built environment perspective. This more recently, there have been 8 goals of universal design that include more focus on participation, health and wellness. So about focus on wellness and health promotion, on social integration, and on being culturally appropriate. I really like this. This is the Auckland Design Manual. You can get it online for free, and Deb did a little graphic of it in our book. And they've developed some design personas to help you think differently when you're designing things. So if you think about a person on crutches, you can see him here on the bottom right. He will need a slip-resistant surface, a step-free entrance, wide automatic doors. The tourist might need clear wayfinding and some seating. Adults with young children will need bathrooms and water fountains. Ambulance officers will need wide corridors and even slip-resistant surfaces. Older people need those same things as the people with low vision. But it's a really nice way to think about, to put yourself in the persona of different users, and then think about all these different user groups and how well or not the design works with them. So my colleague, Marinella Chombuck-Coe and all have got they've just wrapped up an Australian Research Council linkage project that looked at how well or not people with disabilities could get to work. And these are young people, and they asked them to draw out some journey maps about their experience. And you can see here the process of leaving home, driving, and the challenges the person in a wheelchair had to wait for people to help them at certain places, and they were stuck on the train at certain times. And they've outlined more about how we can intervene in different places using technology and navigation and tools and the different process. And so it's just an interesting way to think about the journey and where we might, as designers and creators and policymakers, how we might better support people with disabilities in terms of their ability to navigate the environment, and just simple things like get to work. So we need to redesign our word for inclusion, because if we don't, we're excluding people, we're making them feel like they don't belong. How do we feel when a designed object rejects us, or a door won't open, or something happens? We feel excluded, and we don't want to do that. So the second thing, as well as designing for inclusion, we must design for an aging population, and this is my own research area. it's school holidays, and so I have my 7-year-old stay there. It's like life. The reality is that everybody gains and loses abilities over the course of their lifetime, whether you've broken an arm or you're aging and you're needing to use a walker. And we know the stats quite well. So anyone born today can expect to live to age 82, and that's going to increase quite significantly. And Tobias reminded us of this. But I love, this is my favorite statistic, and it's really memorable. It's about the card you get from Queen Elizabeth II. If you turn 100, you can get a 100th birthday card in the mail, which is, you know, a great achievement. So right now, the Queen sends 3,000 letters to older Australians turning 100. 30 years from now, she or Princess Kate will be sending 20,000. Okay, so right now we've got 3,000 Centurions, people that are over 100 in Australia. In the next 30 years, we're going to have 20,000, and it's a massive increase. And it just goes to show the change that we're going to be experiencing. Okay, and we need to be redesigning a built environment now to prepare for that. And at the same time, I think this is true, and I hope this is true, and I believe it's true, the criteria by which we judge buildings and spaces to be great or successful or wonderful is changing. It's no longer enough that they be architecturally innovative or aesthetically beautiful, but great places are now inclusive and age-friendly. We talked last week about the 880 initiative, that we're creating great cities. We need to make sure that they work for people, whether you're 8 or 80, and it's a really good lens to look through. And of course, we've got the World Health Organization guidelines for age-friendly cities that outline the domains and how we can think about that. And I think in particular, COVID-19 has really highlighted the importance of having an environment that draws us outside. Because too often older people feel that they can't leave their homes. There's no footpaths, it's challenging, it's not accessible. It's kind of a similar experience that we've had during COVID, and that we've realized how important it is that our local environments are, you know, attractive and facilitate physical activity. My own personal research area of expertise is in aged care. And if you've been paying attention, you'll know there's a Royal Commission into aged care at the moment that's basically slammed the sector for being, and I quote, unsafe and uncaring, and that too often older people are left out of sight and out of mind, and there is actually too much. Most people in the sector, I think, are caring and doing their best, but there are too many examples of abuse and neglect. And so what we need to do is shake it up. We need to challenge the status norm. We need to think differently in our aging, urbanizing world. How can we create a great city, a great urban spaces that is inclusive and age-friendly? So I'm going to walk through a couple of examples, and then we can have a go theory storming an age-friendly and inclusive bus stop or bus shelter. So I've mentioned this project a couple of times. We're just kicking this off. It's a grand school project. It's a National Health and Medical Research Council idea project where we're looking at what happens when you co-locate a high school with a retirement village, and how can we bring those two sectors together, and how will that change attitudes and behaviours and the experiences of aging, and the experience and how teenagers view older people. And there's a number, or a growing number, of childcares that are co-located with aged care, but there are no high schools that are co-located with senior living. And so that's a new way of thinking about how we might approach intergenerational learning and living. And it's just conceptual at the moment, but we need these kind of ideas to challenge our thinking. I love this. This is a nursing home in Western Australia. And first off, you can see it's beautifully biophilic. Connected to outdoor. It's got integrated artwork panels. So these are sliding doors inside that have got art on them. So discourage people with dementia from wanting to leave, because you can look at it. And so you can do these things to create, there's no reason why aged care can't be beautiful and not institutional. And indeed, we are seeing that more and more. Small things make a difference too. So a project I did years ago, the retirement village residents had balconies, but the balconies didn't have any taps on them. So it was really hard for them to garden on their outdoor spaces. And so simple things like not having a tap on your balcony meant you had to carry water in and out. It was just much harder. So we need to think about leisure activities and popular things that facilitate activity. This is an example of just braille directions in an office building. on the top of stairs. Tobias talked about falling, and I don't think we really realise the impact of a fall. Falls for older people account for nearly half of all injury-related hospital admissions and deaths in older people. They are a significant predictor of admissions into aged care, and so falling is a real factor. And to cross a street, an urban street, on a crosswalk, when the green man is going, you've got to walk at a speed of 1.2 meters per second, but less than 20% of those aged 65 years and over walk this fast. So even the simple design of crossing a street, it's not set up to help older people. They can't actually make the time to walk across the street. Most older people can't do that. But we can change that. We've got technology. Why are we not changing this? We need to change this. In Singapore, you can get a little card that you tap here and it gives you extra time to cross the street. It extends the green man, okay? Pretty cool, right? But not mainstream yet. There's simple things that we can do, and Tobias has touched on those things. We can have the wayfinding queues and seating and those quiet spaces for people that might have autism or Asperger's, just that place to retreat. People with dementia, you need those kind of wayfinding queues and monuments so that the public urban space is actually inviting and accessible for all. And by doing that, we create a great space for ourselves as well. And it's simple things. It's those having islands in the middle of the street so you can stop and wait, so you can safely cross half the time. It's having some seats that have spaces, you can see top left here, cut out for a wheelchair to sit there. Just little things. And having toilets. If we don't have enough toilets, then a number of cities are engaging with shop owners to enable access to toilets for all people. And just recently, New South Wales released this healthy built environment checklist. I really like it, actually. It's quite helpful. There's a number of good things in here. This is about public open space and ask some questions about universal design. And there's those things, again, that Toby talked about are there opportunities for active and passive recreation, for learning, for play, for adventure, for gathering, for celebration? Is there good access? What are the amenities like? Is there a thing like safety? Is there access? Again, somewhat simple things, but we don't always do them as well as we could. And we don't prioritize them, and they need to be priorities. We want to create a great space that people want to get out to. So I slammed libraries in this presentation a little bit. I sort of talked about how libraries can be inaccessible. Here's a good example of one that is accessible. So this is Europe's largest public library in Birmingham in the UK. It gets 10,000 visitors a day, just recently built. The UK have this great, they remember, Selwyn Goldsmith, the creator of The Dropped Curb. His memory, they have an award for universal design, and there's a number of things in here that are noteworthy. First off, the building's pretty cool and it reflects the industrial heritage of Birmingham on the outside, but they had an access committee who guided the design team, and then within that, they've got level access entry for everybody. They've got lower counters. They've got a lift that goes straight to the garden. They've got a changing places toilet facility with a height adjustable changing bench in place. They've got gardens. So they've got things that make this public space inclusive and accessible. And that's what we need to see more of. So I want to theory storm some inclusive age-friendly design. In our book, Deb and I did a bus shelter, which is kind of one of the most mundane, boring, straightforward, not at all interesting spaces that you can see. But luckily, there's a number of great examples about this around the world. So I took this photo the other day just outside me here at QT Calvin Grove. And you can see that there's no real, it could be anywhere. There's no real sense of place. I mean, I'm not trying to be too critical